Hello, everyone. This is a second episode of Ausländerin or Ausländer Sisters podcast. And here we are going to talk about a specific case and the specific journey of my sister Dunja, about her journey in Austria. She's not in Austria anymore, but the first country where she lived abroad for a couple of years was Austria. And we think that it makes most sense to talk about it because it was full of different challenges. It was full of different visa applications, different bureaucracy issues. And I think Dunja is also happy to finally get it off her chest and share the problems and the journey, the good stuff as well with us here. First, Dunja, do you want to introduce yourself a bit more?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Dunja. I currently live in Spain, but I lived in Austria for almost 7 years, from 2016 to 2000 to the end of 2022. The first time I went to Austria was in late 2014. I was there for 2 months. Then I was again in 2015 for two and a half months. And then I finally moved in early 2016 to Austria. This was the first country where I lived abroad as an expat or foreigner or immigrant. And I would like to share this experience because, as we said, like if we are thinking about where to start from, let's start from the beginning. And this is kind of beginning because your international experience started a couple of years later, which we are also going to talk into details in several following episodes. So yeah, we're starting with my experience in Austria.
But first, let's start from Serbia, actually. What were you doing in Serbia at the time when you started thinking about getting an international experience?
Well, I always had this idea and this kind of drive to go abroad. It was not defined if it's going to be for longer time or shorter time, but I was curious to see how it looks like to live in another country. And it's every day you communicate in a different language. You meet people from different countries, different backgrounds, professionally, culturally, everything. And this was one thing. The other thing is that in Serbia, we were quite limited with options, especially me, because I studied biology. I was an ecologist. I finished my master's degree in 2012, in September 2012. And there were not many options. We could not do much as biologists and ecologists. And I started with one relatively short-term contract at the main hospital complex in Belgrade for around 10 months in 2013 to early 2014. But as I said, this was like a short employment. It was pretty unstable. It was not something that I was actually hoping for from my career, because this was a position that it was a kind of administrative position, and it was, even if I had an option to stay there indefinitely, I didn't consider it as something that I was hoping from my career. And I was thinking about looking for something abroad, precisely because the circumstances in Serbia were such that it looked as a good option to go abroad, at least for a while. And then I realized the easiest way to go abroad for someone like me, who is a non-EU citizen, would be to continue my education abroad. Because I finished my master's in Serbia, for me, the next step would be to go for a PhD somewhere. And this was way easier to get a PhD position and a student visa than employment at that time, especially for someone like me who had no previous experience working anywhere, because as a biologist, it was almost impossible to get a job and to get some valuable experience, actually.
Yes, but you did start a PhD in Serbia, right?
Yes, I did start a PhD in Serbia because I thought it would be easier to get some fellowships I had not much practical experience during my bachelor and master studies. I was not applying much for internships, especially not abroad. I had zero international experience. And I realized at some point that this means that it's going to be very difficult for me to get fully funded PhD position, like for 3 or 4 years without any practical experience. Unfortunately, in Serbia, during our studies, we don't get much practical experience. We don't have any obligation to work for a couple of months, for example, in some lab to learn some techniques, to write some reports, which I think it's very valuable. And here at many universities, it's basically mandatory to do. And for that reason, my experience was pretty weak. Also, I was not applying for much of national internships because there were not many options. I had a couple of months of internship here and there at different departments at my university, but this was not really competitive, I would say, compared to EU internships because we were not really learning much regarding some methods, working with some state of the art equipment and this kind of stuff. We got with this kind of internships, I could not really compete with other people who were looking for a PhD in the EU. And then my idea was that I started a PhD in Serbia back then with the idea that I have access to student grants. And this was my first step, that I get an internship abroad as a PhD student in Serbia. And then to try to apply for a grant, like a full PhD scholarship, to maybe find a potential supervisor or just have an internship as an experience that I can use to find a PhD supervisor and start my PhD studies somewhere abroad.
And we're going to talk more about pressures, and we're going to talk more about other obstacles. But at that time, you had this short-term contract, as you mentioned, and you also started a PhD. So you were kind of in this, I don't know, in between place. You had an idea what you want to do, but especially to people on the outside who didn't know what your plans are, and it seemed quite unstable. I'm quite sure that you also had pressures from around you to find a stable job, to, I don't know, because, for example, for the family, they lived in a different age, right? So it was like, okay, let's just finish the university and then you find a long-term job. You find a job forever and you start a family. How was it for you? Did you have the pressure from your family to stay in one place and just find a work?
Well, yes. I mean, when I finished my master's in 2012, well, our father, he really wanted me to start doing work long term. And actually, thanks to him, I got this job in this hospital I mentioned for a couple of months. This contract, as I said, it was quite unstable. It lasted for a limited amount of time. And then I had to wait again to see if they are going to renew my contract. And in this time gap, I realized that I don't want to do this job, that this job is going nowhere, because what I do this for 2-3 more years, I will not learn much. I will not collect any valuable experience that will make me competitive, neither in public nor in private sector. And I realized that I want to try it my own way, because yes, as you said, that this kind of old-fashioned traditional way, it's just simply something that it was not applicable for me, and I knew it, but I try to play along a bit, because yes, there is a environment that is quite certain about what is that you need to do next.
Yes.
And well, I had to realize that I have to stop listening to other people, because they do seem very confident, but they have no clue. Like, just
Yes.
simply no clue.
But in your environment, you were basically the only person standing out at the time. You were the only person that kind of wanted to take this journey, which doesn't guarantee anything. And all your friends around you were as well finishing universities, finding their jobs, knowing what they want to do. So how did that make you feel?
Well, I was not focusing on what my friends were doing because they had completely different ideas for their life. And this was totally fine for me. They wanted these kind of traditional jobs, either in public or private sector, but they wanted something very stable. And yeah, this was for me totally fine. I had simply different idea about the things. And then I started looking for something abroad. This step of starting a PhD in Serbia at that time looked a bit strange because this did not look like something like working towards going abroad. But I think from the first day I started my PhD in Serbia, I knew that I'm not going to finish it because I knew that even with this master that I had in Serbia, I knew that I could not do anything in Serbia with it. I could not do anything abroad with it. And I realized that it would be even worse if I would get a PhD because then I would be considered as highly qualified. But again, I would not, I don't want to sound like I'm trashing my old university and faculty, but this is really true. We can't really know at the time. Maybe things changed by the time you started studying, but at this time when I was a student there, we had really very few opportunities of doing any kind of practical work. And at that time, we were not even aware of that, but we were not learning many novel methods. We were not told anything about the most recent findings in different fields, and we were not having any kind of specialized study programs. We had very general. I was studying first biology and then I was studying ecology. And when you have this kind of very broad program, of course, you will learn a lot from different fields, but at the end of the day, you will not be expert to do anything. This is why I knew that if I finish my PhD in Serbia, I will just have a paper which says that I have a PhD, but this is not going to qualify me for anything. This was the reason why I wanted to go abroad and finish my PhD somewhere else. But I knew that starting a PhD in Serbia was a good option of getting access to the student grants for going abroad and meeting people abroad because I didn't know anyone abroad at that time. And my first step was getting some international experience, meeting people abroad, and then applying again for PhD positions.
And you went to Austria, but did you choose Austria or did Austria kind of chose you? Because at that time, did you write to people in Austria and they accepted you right away? Or how was your journey towards finding that opportunity?
That's a very long story. Well, I was actually writing to several places. I was not very selective. I did start to learn German at some point before I went to Austria for the first time. But this was like, I was just looking at my chances objectively. I am most interested in the EU. I was not really super selective. I wanted to go somewhere in the EU, but I was even considering the US, Canada, New Zealand, different places. But my preference was one of the EU countries. And then I was thinking like, okay, what is the most likely country? What is the most useful language that I can learn that I will potentially need in a near future? And this is why I started learning German. So I ended up in Austria and it proved useful, of course. But no, I was not really thinking about like I had to go to Austria. I was sending my CV, also applications to different groups in different countries in the EU, and I sent an email to my to my first host in Austria, and then even later my PhD supervisor in Austria into like was March, April 2014. I sent an email, and this email was a little bit more, let's say, personalized. I was always trying to, for each application, to put something in email that it's not really very general, especially like not something starting with dear professor or something like this, but really by name and surname. But I would say that this email was even more personalized, because I sent an email to a young postdoc at the time in Austria from Hungary, and she did a PhD on this temporary lakes that exist in Austria, Hungary, and Serbia. And she was also doing some sampling in Serbia, but also in some lakes that I was also working with. And then I realized, okay, I will write to her, and it will be even more like personalized, because I will mention that I was working with the same systems, that I am interested in any kind of collaboration, like not necessarily like me going there, but I am working with this right now. I'm also like a PhD student in Serbia, and if there is any possibility we collaborate, it would be great. She was not the first person that responded. There were many emails that I did not get any response, but she was the first person who responded in a kind of a positive way, that she really saw an option for us to collaborate. And she even said, okay, why don't you come here for some time? Let's see if we can work out to find some grant for you as a student. And yeah, let's try. And this was like a first invitation I got. I finished my master in 2012 in September. The first invitation I got to go somewhere abroad was in April 2014. And I was working at this hospital complex for 10 months. I was not very active in that, but for months I was searching before I got any kind of positive response.
But how did it look like? Did you search opportunities? Did you search internships? Did you search for a specific group, like group names? How did your search look like?
Well, actually, a little bit of everything. I knew a couple of websites where they were posting open positions or open internship possibilities. There were some websites that I knew that they might be offering some grants at some point. I was also looking for like scientific publications, and which like groups are publishing something, for example, that I'm actually interested in doing also during my PhD. And then I was following a couple of groups like that. I mean, at this time, this was not really the time when social networks had so much importance for finding positions. I guess Twitter came later. Twitter for a couple of years was very useful for finding PhD positions, for example, and postdoc opportunities. And this was way back then, when I would say social networks, at least I did not see many opportunities on social networks, and they were not used for that. This just came later. But there were some websites that were exactly for that, or there were some email lists that were for that. They were posting internship and master thesis and PhD opportunities. But I was also searching scientific papers that I liked and that were relevant for my interest. And from there, I was like looking for the names, group leaders, and then I would check their groups, see if they have any open position. If they don't have any open position that I could apply for, and then I would just write them an email telling them that I found them through their work. I am interested in doing my PhD in something similar. Can we talk about something? Of course, I would send them what I did so far. Maybe it could be very easily that my first emails, they were not personalized, that I did not take much initiative in proposing a common work, what would be a common topic, or I was not talking much about my work by then. And I think this could be a cultural difference, because we in Serbia, we are told that if we are approaching employer, it's considered to be more professional if you are sending your CV and you're putting an email with a much of a generic text, basically. And if you're not trying to personalize it enough, because it's considered that if this person has something for you, they are going to suggest it to you, and they're going to tell you what is that thing that they want you to do for them. But Actually, in Europe, it's in the EU, actually, it's actually quite the opposite. You should approach someone with exact idea so that person sees that you have a specific interest, that you have ideas, and that you are motivated about this topic. And even if it happens that they are currently not working with this topic, or they are currently not, they don't have fundings for this area of research, they will look positive to this suggestion, and then they even can be motivated to give you a counter suggestion. So they would say, okay, this what you said is very nice, I liked it very much, or I like the way you think. Your suggestion is good, but we currently don't have fundings for this, or our group is now switching interest to something else. Would you maybe be interested in something like that? That this is something I did not know at the time, because in Serbia we are told that we should approach people a bit differently. So I think this my early emails were like that, more like something that sounded a bit general, that there was a bit of a generic text. Yes, this maybe was not really helping my case. Regarding where I was searching for this position, it was a bit of everything.
But I think that's exactly the way to do it. You send emails, you reach out to people, and every time you send another email or approach another person, you try to change a little bit, because you see or you saw that these things were not bringing you any results. So you were adjusting every time a little bit more. And as you said, the last email, or maybe not the last, but the person who responded positively, you reached out to her very personalized, in a sense that what are your interests and how that overlaps with her interests, and how would you like to proceed. Or I was wondering, she answered, and then what did you do? How did you feel? As we said, between the answer and the opportunity and actually going to the place, there are still a few steps to take into account.
At that point, when she sent me a response and sent me this suggestion that maybe I can go and visit them and work with them for some time, this was not a concrete offer, because she was not telling me, okay, come visit us, we have the money, you don't need to do anything, just tell me the dates and we can set it up. Because at that point they had very limited funding for this kind of stuff, for internships and student visits. And she asked me if I could find and also I could not go there without any financial support, because the money I had at the time was very low. And I knew that I will have to look for some grant to go to Austria. But I have to say that this was the first positive answer, at least invitation, that I would be welcome if I go somewhere, that I got for almost 2 years of searching. And it really meant like I got a position there. For me, this was amazing. And then I started searching right away. There was this one website, I don't know if it still exists, grant.at or grants.at. And they have, this is a quite a nicely organized web page for all sorts of possibilities to go to Austria, or to go from Austria to another country as a student or a researcher, like a young researcher, even an established researcher. They have all sorts of these academic research or possibilities, funding possibilities there. And then I found one grant that I could apply for. It was actually at the time very stressful, because this was the first proposal I had to write in my life in English, to write something officially in English. It was quite stressful at the time, but of course now if I look back to it, it looks super easy. But yes, it took some months of preparations. I submitted application, I think it was sometime in September, and then they got a positive response in October. And then it was quite short amount of time, because at first we thought that I don't need a visa, because if you go as a tourist from Serbia to Austria, you don't need a visa. You can go for up to 3 months without any additional administrative steps. But if I go there as a student, and if I'm going to have an Austrian grant to go there, I need a visa in order to be able to get this funding So then I had a very little time to actually apply for this visa, and I had to collect documents very quickly. And luckily, after I submitted these documents, they told me that I should come back in a week and they should be ready. And this meant a lot because if I had to wait any longer, I would be late with this, and then we would have to see if we can postpone, and there would be a lot of complications. So it meant a lot that this procedure was quite simplified and fast. Then I got my visa on time, and then I went there in November
And what
2014.
documents did you need for that visa? So that was a student visa, right?
Yes, this was a student visa as a visiting student, not a Austrian student visa. So not for studying in Austria. It was just for these 2 months, so I can get this grant once I get there.
So you didn't need documents as you were going there for your studies. I mean, they didn't ask for so many different and difficult stuff. What did you have to collect? Do you remember?
No, not anymore. I think I needed this confirmation that I got this grant. Yeah, I needed an invitation from the institute that they are expecting me there, that they're inviting me to visit them. I think I need confirmation that I am a student in Serbia. Yeah, some personal documents, I think my passport and something like this. But I don't remember anymore.
Okay, so then you have a grant, you have a visa, and you have to go in the middle of nowhere, right?
Yes, and I knew this from the start. The, the institute where I was going to, it was a limnological institute, so it studies fresh water, and it was basically at the lake. It was a small village. It's a wonderful village. It's called Lonesome Zem, and with a wonderful lake. But it was quite remote. It was quite isolated, which I did not really comprehend at the time that it's that isolated. And luckily, my supervisor, she came to pick me up. I would go from Vienna to Amstetten, and then she would pick me up from Amstetten, so I will have to change. But then this was like 50 kilometers away from Lund. So next time when I was visiting and traveling, it was quite an adventure with changing trains and traveling for quite some time, quite longer than the car.
Okay, you got there and you were there for 2 months with a grant. And what happened next?
Yeah, so this project that we suggested to do did not really work out. Actually, within the first week, we became aware that this is not going to work out, that we are not going to have many results from it. We could also just say it did not work out and nobody would care. Actually, I think I did not really have to give any super detailed report or show the results or anything, but we really want to have something that we can publish. And also we were thinking like maybe I can use it for my thesis eventually, no matter if it would be in Serbia or somewhere else, so that we got to very quickly figure out something else that I can do there. And then I was giving my best effort there. I was trying so much because I knew that I need to prove myself, because this was my first chance. I did not know if and when I'm going to have a next chance. So I was really working like crazy. I think I even spent 2 nights at the institute setting up some experiments, not 2 nights in a row, but I think one for sure. I remember I returned back to the dorm sometime around 8, 8 something a.m. And then I just slept for a couple hours and went back to the institute. So I was trying really hard and I really wanted to make an impression. And also I wanted to learn, because this was my first chance to do something practical and to learn something that is done in an environment with a lot of equipment, with a lot of methods that I can apply. And this was one thing. The second thing is that I really liked it there a lot. It was everything I ever imagined, because you know how sometimes they tell you, no, but it's not so amazing. If you think that if you go somewhere else, you will have more options, you will have like a better working environment, whatever. No, it was like literally all that I was ever imagining in a positive way. It was like that. There was so much of modern equipment. People were nice, they were competent, they were working quite a lot, they were giving a lot of effort. Every day during the lunch break or coffee breaks, we were talking about what next we could do and how we can improve things that we were doing, and like what a new experiment idea or a project idea we can come up with. So this was very stimulating, intellectually stimulating, and I was learning a lot at that time. And then I realized that this is how I imagine it. It's really nice. First thing I could try to do is to stay here, actually. And then I was looking for some PhD scholarships, Austrian scholarships for doing entire PhD. And then I realized that I should come up with a concrete suggestion. So one of my last days there, I suggested that I apply for a PhD grants and do my entire PhD in Austria. And this was end of December 2014, when I suggested this. They liked the idea. They wanted to help me to get funding to do that. I started my PhD in Austria in 2015, but it was only 16 when I get a student visa, because I needed to figure out how to get the visa. So I got my visa in 2016. And actual funding to finish my PhD in Austria, I got in 2017, in May 2017. So it was a quite of a journey.
Yes, so you applied for this scholarship when you found it, but it didn't work out, right?
I found two scholarships. One was awarded by University of Vienna for several PhD candidates, and the other one was awarded by Austrian Academy of Science. And I applied for both of them. I first applied for this university fellowship, for which deadline was in January 15, and I got quite quickly rejected. And then there was this other one in May 2015. There was a deadline. And I got rejected in the last circle, actually. And I only found out about rejection in like November 2015. So it took quite a while. I already became a PhD student at University of Vienna, because this was one of the conditions of this grant. In order that they process your application until the end, you had to be a student at the time. And I even had to defend my thesis project in front of the committee of the University of Vienna. So I had to do all of this. I was in Austria in September 2015, preparing this defense, not knowing if I will be able to do this, actually, because we had no funding at the time. And then I found out I was rejected. And this was one of my biggest disappointments in life, because I invested so much time in that, so much energy, also money, because when I was preparing this application in spring in 2015, I went a couple of weeks, basically self-finance to Austria to prepare this application. In September, I had to come to Vienna. I had to prepare all the documents, become the student of the university, enroll, pay the tuition fee for that semester, go in front of this committee, prepare the presentation, also be there for a couple of months, basically self-finance, to defend this topic and to send them this confirmation that we did all the steps that were mandatory in order to process the application. And then to find out that it was rejected, it was quite a disappointment. And at that moment, for a while, I did not know what to do. This year for me, 2015, was actually quite difficult, because I got a couple of rejections. I was also applying for some more positions, but also I was not really. But this was the moment when I was applying for PhD positions, and I was at least getting interviews. Which for me at that point was a huge thing. Like, this never happened to me before. I was not even invited for interviews before. And I could really see the result of this one internship in Austria, where I had some concrete result after 2 months, because we started working on a manuscript right after I finished this internship. And then I submitted this manuscript, and they could see that at first I got this grant, which was really nice. Then I was there for 2 months. And then I even had a manuscript submitted from this internship. So at least at this point, I could see that I started getting at least interviews for a PhD position. I had an interview in the Netherlands, one interview in the Netherlands, and one interview in Italy in 2015, maybe early 16 as well. And this was at least something. But still, I invested so much in this application to go to Austria to do my PhD. It was quite disappointing.
Yes, but it's not just that. It's also, as you said, you invested so much, and then you are thinking, what else can I change? What else can I do to get this scholarship next year? It's not just waiting for another year.
Yes, it's everything. I wanted to get to a certain point in my life, so this was going a bit slower than I imagined it. I was trying to improve, like what can I implement next to improve my chances. We were not just sitting and waiting to apply again for this fellowship. I was helping also with project applications where I would be employed if this project application would be successful, I would be employed as a PhD student at the institute. So there were several things we were working on at the same time. I was not trying for these fellowships. We were not just trying for this fellowship. In 2016, I got this student contract in Austria, first one. I got it on a project, but this was a small contract on a different project, and I resubmitted this application. In the meantime, I started working on a project that it's more related to this thing that I wanted to do, to the topic I wanted to work with, and also it was more hours. So in January 2017, I got a contract with more hours and with a project that is related to the project I was planning to do for my PhD. Only in spring 2017, I had like a full-time PhD student position with this grant, and that was like that I will be most likely able to finish my PhD with.
Yes, but help me understand. You said that in the time when you were applying to this fellowship, that unfortunately you didn't get in the end, you had to be a student, a PhD student in Vienna. And sometime during that time, you were in Serbia, and also you spent some time in Austria. So did you actually have to be in Austria physically to be enrolled, or to have a certain visa to be enrolled as a PhD student in University of Vienna?
No. Yeah, this is something that I was also a little bit surprised about when I realized that it works in that way. So I could enroll at University of Vienna, and this confirmation that I am enrolled at university, I could use to apply for a visa. But at that time, I don't know if something changed, but I don't think so. The University of Vienna really did not care much for how long you do your PhD. You are a PhD student as long as you pay your tuition fee. In case of at least students from outside of the EU, because for the students in the EU, they were just paying some 20 euro tax. I don't remember what exactly it was, but it was basically for free. For non-EU citizens, we had to pay at that time close to 400 euros per semester. In the meantime, this amount was doubled, and I don't know if it changed more in the meantime, but I know that it was at one point close to like 5-6 years ago, it was close to 800 per semester. And they didn't really care if you have a student visa. I don't know what would happen if I actually started to actively participate the courses and take exams, because this I didn't do that. I was waiting for a concrete topic that I'm going to work with and concrete funding that I will have to start really doing my PhD, because I was already having one started PhD in Serbia that I knew that I was not going to finish. So I did not want to give any effort for another one until I get some funding.
And enrolling to the university, did you just have to follow some steps and get enrolled, or was it competitive? Like, what was the procedure?
For enrolling to your PhD, there was no really exam or anything you needed to do. So the only thing you needed to do was to send confirmation, like that you finish a master's and that your grades from your master's, you need to translate it. I don't remember if it really had to be in German or it could also be in English. Actually, it was quite well explained on their webpage what were the documents you needed. Of course, one of the documents was that you have your master finished in Serbia, but you could apply anytime during the year. In some countries, this is not the case. You have, I think, once per year or maybe twice option to apply. In Vienna, you were able to apply at any time. And then in a couple of weeks, they just answer to you, tell you if you got admitted or not.
Okay. And between 2014, when you actually wanted to start your PhD, and 2017, when you got finally the funding, you were on and off in Austria, right?
Yes, I was.
Sometimes it was on your own expense, but sometimes you did have some support.
Yes, so in spring 2015, as I said, I went there like I almost fully financed myself because I wanted to put together this application there with them because then we would all have more time to spend on it. And this, I think they only like paid my accommodation back then at the institute. Not sure, but I think they paid my accommodation at the institute's dorm. And in autumn, when I went there to take this exam in front of the committee, I was there for like 2 months, and they paid my travel expenses and they paid my accommodation at the dorm of the institute. I had to cover myself for food and such stuff. And then in 2016, when I went there, they invited me to give me a short-term contract, so to work for 8 hours per week, and they would pay my accommodation and my travel costs. But then when I got there, we realized that I cannot get any kind of contract until I have some type of visa. And then we realized, okay, as a student, I can get a student visa. And then once I get the student visa, I have a right to work certain amount of hours in Austria, and then they could give me a contract. This is how I started this my real residence in Austria, not just visiting, but being a resident in Austria. I got a student visa for 1 year as a PhD student at University of Vienna, and this was the first visa I got, and it was the most difficult visa application I had in my life because, of course, I had to prove that I was a student in Austria. I had to prove that I have accommodation for the next 1 year. So the institute at the dorm, they gave me this confirmation that I can stay there for 1 year. I had to have, at that time, 10,000 something euros on my account that can prove that I can finance myself. And of course, I did not have this money, and this contract that they offered me was not even close to that. So I had to borrow this money to put it on my bank account from my family, basically. And I had to have a contract with the health insurance, which was obliging me to pay around 50 euros every month in the next year. The confirmation that I don't have any legal process against me in Serbia, nor that I had any legal processes in the past. And yeah, so I think also some kind of personal documents like passport and such stuff. Maybe I forgot something, but this accommodation thing and the money thing was the most complicated for me. Making a contract for 1 year to share a room with somebody, this was extremely expensive. Also, the dorm room in Vienna, I don't think they're very expensive if you look like European average or something. But for me, this was like 1 year contract to pay, I don't know, 300-400 euros per month. This was like impossible. But then it turned out that I can get this contract from the institute, which was really nice because I was not having any obligation financially. And then I also had to find this 10,000 euros. It was borrowed money, and I needed to return it as soon as possible. As soon as I get my visa, I had to return it.
For the process regarding the money, because I think in each country it varies, and also in the past years it also changed a lot. So at the time, the process was that you, as far as I understood, so you get the money, you put it on your account, and as soon as you get the visa, you could take it off.
Yes, I know that there are all sorts of strategies that people apply in these kind of situations. I heard there were many students from Serbia, for example, who would just put the money on their account, get this confirmation stating that they have the money on the account, and they would almost the same or the next day they would withdraw the money, because this is, of course, in most of situations, this is borrowed money. These people don't have this amount of money, and uh, I was not doing that because I knew that sometimes, because they know the way around it and they know how that this is happening, I knew that if I withdraw the money from my account and they asked me a week later to show this confirmation again, but with the date from the week later, then I would have a problem. Or if even if they see the movement in the meantime, that I will have a problem. So what I did is that I did not withdraw the money, but I was very limited with time. I could not keep this money in my account for a very long time. And I was really lucky that I was applying for a visa as I was in Lund and I would be staying and living in Lund. I was applying for my student visa in Schijps. So this is the capital of this region. And it's a very small municipality. When I went there was basically nobody at immigration. I was there so many times and I rarely saw ever anybody there. So people were a little bit more open and nice, and they were not stressed. They were not strict, and they were really helpful. So I was asking for visa. I went there. I just appeared there at the time. They said, okay, this is good. I mean, of course, with the documents, I had help from the secretary of the institute because she was calling the police in Schijf, and she was asking them what is actually that I need. And she was telling me what I need to collect. I collected, I went there, and it was a huge leap. And she told me, like, I come back in a week to pick up the card. And at that time, I was not really understanding what that means because I didn't know if I'm going to get a visa, if it means that she's going to send my papers and wait for the response and tell me the response in a week, or she accepted my papers and then I just need to come to pick up the card in a week. And I think it was the latter that the moment she accepted my documents, this was not, at least in this case, I don't know how it works in Vienna. I think in Vienna is a bit more complicated because they submit and then they wait for the response, sometimes even for months. And definitely, if you are applying as a student in Vienna, this process is way, way more complicated. And the amount of documents you need is the same, more or less. They ask for the same documents, but I think people are still waiting to hear the response, and then they go to pick up the card at some point. And then I went in a week. I got the card, and the moment I got the card, and I knew that now this procedure is finished, I withdrew the money and gave it back to my father because he also didn't have this money on his account, but he also needed to return it to the bank. And it was perfectly timed because he had, I don't remember if it was 7 or 10 days that he could return the money to the bank that he borrowed from them, and they would not calculate the interest. And then this was perfect. I returned the money immediately. He returned it to the bank, and we just paid some fee for processing this request. And that was it.
Okay. So that was the first visa that you got in Austria that you could use to basically work with at
Yeah,
the
I could use to work, and I could be a resident there, actually. That I have no time limit how long I can stay in Austria, but I can stay there throughout the whole year. And I got a limited time that I could work with. I think it was 20 hours per week. And because I was working at the institute as someone who was like employed by the institute, but it was not specified that it's a research position, but it's more like technician. I had to get the permissions from their work of like employment office that there are no people at the employment office waiting for the same position in the region, so I can start working actually. But this was quick. This was done. I think the institute applied for this permission. I didn't have to do it myself, and it was, I think, within a couple of days. finished.
So you had that visa for a year, and did you know at the time that in a case that you don't have funding or that you don't get the funding for your PhD within that year, that you can extend it? Or did you still have a fear that, okay, you have this year and maybe nothing happens within that year and then...
Yeah, so I had it for a year. I was also keeping it in mind that I have to have a certain minimum number of the student points. But we were hoping that I will get funding because we were really applying. I was applying for the scholarship. They were also applying for some projects, and we were saying to ourselves, something has to work out from all of these things. And actually, I did not have this visa eventually for a year because the moment they wanted to increase my hours, which was in early 2017. So this was again one of these things like a lot of stress. And because they first wanted to give me this contract with more hours with my student visa. And then they said, no, they are not going to give me this contract with my student visa because they want to get me this researcher visa, because for them this procedure was way more simple, because the moment I have this researcher visa, they can employ me for as many hours as needed. Even though this was a part-time position, they were not limited with amount of hours that they can employ me on, and they did not have to ask for the permission from it's called IMS, so it's basically the working office in Austria. So they didn't have to ask for a permission from them anymore. They could employ me straight away because a researcher's visa, these are special type of visa, and there you don't have any obligation because this is very specialized workers actually. So they don't have an obligation to consult with this work service for this kind of employment.
The institute applied for that visa, or did you still have to?
Again, I had to go and apply. What they did is that they gave me a pre-contract showing that I'm going to get this employment as soon as I have this visa. So this actually delayed my employment, and I did not really start in January, but I started in February. So it delayed for like a month and a half. And at this point, it was again one of these things that I was super stressed about because I needed to apply again for a visa. And I felt that they damaged me in a way. But then it turned out that they actually did me a favor because with this visa, as I said, I could work as many hours as it was needed. I didn't have to ask for any kind of permissions. And actually, this visa started counting my time in Austria towards getting a permanent residence, because with a student visa, this time doesn't count. The moment you finish your studies, if you finish your studies with a student visa, you can apply for like a resident visa, but it makes it way more difficult for you if you are on a student visa, because this time doesn't count towards a long-term residency in Austria.
So for how long did you actually have the student visa before you shifted to the researcher visa?
I think a bit more than 8 months, 9 months, something like this.
Wow. Okay. And then with the researcher visa, your funding started for the PhD, and you were able to basically extend the researcher visa as you went, or...
Yes, so I actually got this researcher visa, I think, for 1 year because they had enough money to employ me for 1 year. Once I got this fellowship, that was like a full-time PhD student, and I switched to in August. I didn't have to apply for another visa because, as I said, this visa meant that you can work full-time as a researcher. So I could immediately start working as a full-time PhD student, but then I had to reapply after 1 year. I had to extend my researcher visa, yes, for another one for 2 years.
Okay.
But basically, yes, this researcher visa you get based on a contract that has a certain time limit, and then they give you this researcher visa for the time that you actually can prove that you're going to be employed.
Okay, wow.
But I think but I think for the researcher visa, the good thing is that you are on researcher visa, I think, for 2 years. This is the maximum time that you can be on researcher visa. And then, even though if you are still working as a researcher, you can apply for this Rot-Weiss-Rot card, which is not just mean that you can work as a researcher in Austria. So it is like a very qualified, very specific kind of work. But with a Rot-Weiss-Rot Plus card, you can actually work whatever you want. You're not related to employer anymore. You can still work as a researcher, but you can also apply for any kind of job in Austria. And this is what I did. So I applied first for 1 year. This card was first for 1 year. Then after 1 year, I had the right to ask for a 3-year card. And then after 3-year card, once I completed 5 years of being in Austria, including this time, the moment from when I got this research visa, not a student visa, but a research visa, the moment I completed 5 years, I was able to apply for a long-term residence, which is kind of forever. To stay in
Until
Austria.
if you want to, and with that, you can basically apply for the citizenship, right? After some time.
Yes. I don't know what is exactly number of years that you have to be in Austria, but yes, I think actually for the citizenship, I'm not sure. Maybe you can even apply with the 3-year card, because there is a big milestone between 1 year and 3-year card. In order to get 3-year visa, the main thing that you need to prove is that you have a certain level of German language, and you have to do a test. And if you don't have this kind of test, you will not be able to get this 3-year visa. And so if you don't have this test, every year you have to renew this Rot-Weiß-Rot Plus card. But if you have the test, you can get it for 3 years. And this is the moment that means that you are close to getting more permanent residence in Austria. Yes.
Okay.
And then I don't remember. I think that then I did not have to take any. I was not taking any extra course for the long-term residence. So the moment I was on 3-year residence permit, and the moment I fulfill these 5 years, I automatically switch to the long-term residence.
Okay, so basically, when you started your fellowship and when you got the researcher visa, a lot of doors in Austria opened for you. And just briefly to say, after your PhD, you actually stayed in Austria for a few more years, right? And you didn't have more bureaucratic issues there.
Yes, so the moment when my PhD student funding ended and when I finished my PhD, I was on this 1-year Rot-Weiß-Rot Plus card. And then after my funding finished, I went to their employment office and I applied for unemployment money. I think eventually I was around 6 months unemployed because this was beginning of 2020. And I found a job in April 2020, actually late March 2020, but I could not start until June because there was they just everything was in lockdown, and they prefer that they wait to ease up a bit so they can actually then we can start the contract. So I started in June 2020 at another institute, but this meant a lot because I still had this Rot-Weiß-Rot Plus card when my funding ended. And with this, I just went to the employment office and I got unemployment money. I had access to searching job in Austria, and then I eventually found another job in Austria in a couple of months. Since I had the test already passed, the certificate, they gave me a 3-year visa, and then this was a kind of a big milestone because from then this meant I can apply for a long-term residence, I can apply for citizenship at some point and everything without proving myself much more any longer. Yes.
Yeah, I think this was quite a journey and it was quite a struggle.
This was in short.
Yes, I mean, I think we can all see from the beginning how everything seemed so uncertain and how you had to apply for so many different visas, submit so many papers. And then in the end, like so many doors actually opened for you because you were able to stay there. You were basically part of the system. You got unemployment money and you found another job there. I think it's amazing. As you said, there were so many rejections. There were so many times when you were so down and thought, okay, that's it. Like there is no way forward in this direction anymore. But now I am really interested in the other part, in the psychological part, emotional part. As we said, we mentioned before friendships, we mentioned before the environment. So how did you feel first, like leaving people in Serbia that you know? And also you had this period when it was kind of on and off and you didn't know whether you are going to stay in Austria or you're going to go back to Serbia and maybe try for another place. So how was it emotionally for you to be in between places?
Well, for me, The most stressful thing was that I could not stay in Austria indefinitely because I had to count the days to be careful not to overstep this limit of time that I can stay there. And I looked forward to settling myself, starting something to do like my PhD abroad. So this was all something in between. It was not really starting, at least until 2016 when I had this first visa. 2017 was really the year when the things took off. When I got this researcher visa, which was much better conditions, and when I got better funding options, and I was not really thinking so much about people that I was living in Serbia because I really wanted to just go as soon as possible because I was already in Serbia for 25, 6, 7 years of my life. And I really wanted to try something else. So at first I was not thinking about it at all. And only later came to me that now I'm starting to feel it. I'm starting to feel how it is to be without your family close for a prolonged amount of time. That you, when you now know that you're going to stay here and that you are really just going to see them for your holidays, like not to return after a couple of months and stay with them for a couple of months. But now, really, you are just going to see them for your holidays. Yes, then I became more aware that there is also a downside of all of this. And this is some kind of feeling that you have to learn to live with from then on.
I mean, we were visiting you quite often. So I think when it comes to family, maybe you didn't feel that because you were also living in dorm during your bachelor studies and master studies in Belgrade. So, I mean, it wasn't quite different.
Yes, during my studies, I was also away from family because I was living in a dorm in Belgrade. I had kind of on my own all these years. So it was not the first time that I was away from home, but yes, it was a totally different experience because then you become aware of the distances and limitations that you cannot go anytime you want. For me, it was also one important step in 2017 when I got this fellowship, which was a full-time PhD student fellowship that enabled me to buy a car. And then it was different because I knew that I can not literally, but I knew that I can come to Serbia whenever I want. If it's something happening that is really important and that I have to be there, all I need to do is to sit in a car and I will be there. In other kind of situations, I would have to check for the transport, public transport options to plan it a little bit more in advance. And this was more psychologically difficult. It was easier because then I could plan a bit more spontaneously and not to depend, not literally, but not to depend on anything. This
Yes,
was
but
more to me.
for you, it was quite difficult because, as we said, you lived in such a remote place. So without a car, living is hard, like going shopping and moving around, but also coming to Serbia because you had to change so many buses, trains, and other means of transport. And yeah, I think for you in general, like a lot changed when you actually got a car.
Yes, definitely.
But speaking of the like pressures, in the beginning of the episode, I asked you how you felt when you saw that your friends from around you were actually like finding, like as you said, these traditional jobs, like settling and finishing their university. But while you were in this between place, and when everything was kind of so uncertain for you, did you have actually the pressure from your friends and from your family to be more like them, or to, just give up and find something that is more certain? Because for a while, it seemed like you didn't know if it's going to work out or not.
Well, I think, no, from friends, not so much. I think it was kind of clear that they don't really understand what I am doing and trying to do, but they were not saying much. They just let me do it without much interfering because, of course, they could not really give me any advice or anything. And regarding family, yes, you get all sorts of comments. Sometimes they are very positive and encouraging. Sometimes, like, yeah, maybe this was not a very good idea. Maybe you should think about this and that, maybe something more like traditional or straightforward or something like that. But I think in general, I had quite a supporting environment because, as I said, my father I mean, most of the money I borrowed from my father, and one part of the money I borrowed from our other sister and my brother-in-law. So they were all very supportive, actually. And of course, I returned them the money as soon as I get the first residence permit, the same moment. But I mean, this is also a trust to borrow this amount of money, and it shows that these people are actually supporting you and they believe in you. So, yeah.
True. But also, we spoke in the first episode about having international friends and making international friendships. How was it for you from the first time in Austria until basically the end of your time in Austria? Was it easy to find friends? Did you find some friends in unexpected places? How did it look for you?
The institute, the first place where I was working, I met people. They were also foreigners there, coming there to do their PhD or master thesis or shortly visiting or doing a postdoc for a couple of years. So then it was relatively easy because we were all foreigners there. Then you just start to talk to people. You start making plans together because you want to do things together, and yeah, it was easy. Then I also met my boyfriend in 2017. Then he was living in Graz at the time. I was going there like every second weekend on average. I was also meeting some people through him, but it was mostly my friends from Lodz, from the institute. I did not have to put much effort into that because we were all foreigners. We didn't know anyone. It was a small village, so it was just that we had each other, and this is how it worked. And then later, when I moved to another place, when I got my first postdoc, it was a town close to Salzburg, and then I started like more actively looking for friends. When I was going to this German course in Salzburg, I met some people. Then through these people, I met some other people. I became active in some Facebook groups for meeting people in Salzburg. It was more actively searching for friends
Yeah,
because at
so
this institute there were not so many foreigners. But I also have some friends from there. I also made some friends through work, and but not so much as in Lodz.
yeah, so at that other institute near Salzburg, you were not really in your own bubble with other foreigners and having to rely on each other. But you also, I remember, had some really nice friends that were foreigners or Germans or Austrians from that institute.
I had some friends that were from the institute, and also in Salzburg. I also met some Austrians, but it was mostly foreigners.
And do you have anything else to add? Any impression, any experience that you had during this time?
Well, yes, I think the most frequent question that people have when they're starting their search to go abroad is like where to start from, because many people sometimes even they don't know where they would go, and then they make all sorts of inquiries to different universities or institutes. I think the beginning is to find where and what you want to do and with whom. For me, it was like I had this group in Austria that I wanted to do my PhD with. I focused 80% of my efforts to end up there and finish my PhD there. Of course, at the beginning of things, I was also looking for other options. I was also applying for other open PhD positions, just in case that this doesn't work out. But most of my efforts, I was focusing on this group because we already had some type of communication. So I think the first step really for people who are looking for a PhD position is that they first figure out with themselves what they want to do and what they have experience with, because this is also important. Like you cannot, it's not going to work if you just say, I really want to do this, let's do it. You really need to have at least a little bit of experience with that. And then once you know what you want to do, you write to people that are experts in that field with concrete suggestions what you want to do. You don't write these general emails because nobody is going to answer on these emails. You really need to say why you want to do this. What is your experience with that? You don't have to have, I don't know how much experience, but at least some experience, and how you connect your previous experience with that what you want to do now. So you write an email that is a bit specific to the group and to the person that you are writing to. And then once you get a positive response from that person that is going to be wants to be your supervisor. Then you go further, like looking for funding, looking for to apply for visa, to start your PhD. Then things go step by step. It depends from country to country. It depends what steps are exactly going to be. But you need to enroll, you need to find the funding, you need to apply for visa. And depending on the country, these steps are like in different order.
Yeah, I think
And
this
that's
is
it.
a great summary. And I think it's a great kind of like cheat sheet of the steps that you took and usually how it works, actually. So I think this is a great story. And while you were talking, I felt stressed. So I can't even imagine how it was for you during that time. I mean, I do have some insights because we were talking during that time, but I was a high school student and I didn't understand a lot of it. And I didn't understand how a person can be in such stress and what does it mean. But now that you're saying it, it's completely different feeling. And I'm really glad that you went through it. That, I mean, not that you went through the stress, but that you managed to do it and to stay in Austria. And it opened so many doors for you. And as you said, you met your boyfriend at the time in Austria and now your husband. And you have so many people that you know from that period that you're still friends with. You did your PhD. So I think that you got so many experiences and so many good experiences in the end from that journey.
Sometimes when I think about these years, I don't know, between 2014 and 2017, I am still feeling a little bit of pain from that time. It's not like all gone and just positive is left. Of course, the result was worth it, and it's just such a satisfaction that it came out of it, and so many opportunities that I would, of course, I would go through it anytime again, definitely.
Wow, I see. Yeah, again, thank you for sharing and for
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you for asking very nice questions
Yes,
because, yes, it was very well, yeah, very well structured.
and for everyone, yeah, this episode will be or is on YouTube. You can see some of the shorts or behind the scenes on YouTube, some reels on Instagram, Auslander Sisters. And we also have a blog, Ausländerin. We have a Facebook page, Ausländerin. And you can also support us through Buy Me a Coffee. And yes, if you like the story, please share with your friends, share with people who are in similar situation or have similar aspirations, like they want to go abroad. You can follow us on Instagram. You can follow us on Facebook. And we will be very happy if you shared your stories with us, or if you have any questions, we are happy to answer anytime. Thank you for
Yes.
watching.
Thank you. Bye.